ask how many of you are here for the first time? Quite a few, okay. What Jill and Wendy have tried to do in the 3 years that HorrorCon... Oh, by the way, my name's Tony. I'm doing the interview with Heather. What they've tried to do in the 3 years that HorrorCon has been running is listen to the fans and bring in the guests that you want to meet and whose pictures you want and who you want to talk to. And at the very top of that list is Heather Langenkamp. There are very few people who have been in at the beginning of a movie franchise that literally changed cinema history, and A Nightmare on Elm Street did that. She's done other things too, and we know what they are. But what I'm going to focus on in our Q&A is that first movie. So if you want to ask your own questions, I'll be taking the microphone out to the audience, and you can ask the things that you want to talk about. So we've got about half an hour. Please don't be shy. If you have a question, do put your hand in the air. Do ask your question. And if you don't want to ask it today, we'll be doing it all again tomorrow. So would you please give a big HorrorCon welcome to our special guest, Heather Langenkamp. This is where the fun begins. Welcome. Welcome to Yorkshire. Welcome to the north. Welcome to the cold. Welcome to HorrorCon. We're going to warm things up. I don't have any original questions to ask. You've been asked these a million times before, but what I wanted to focus on was that first movie and your introduction to horror and to all of this. And I wanted to ask, it's a silly question really, but did you have any indication at all that it was special, that it was unusual? How big a break was it for you? And 30 odd years later, would you ever have expected this? And the American circuit, which is even bigger.
Well, I knew it was different because when I took the role of Nancy, the script seemed so like nothing I'd ever read before, and I had never been familiar with what a horror movie was going to be like, and I'd never auditioned for one before. So I had low expectations. All the time I was working on it, I felt like, oh, this will be the kind of project that I don't think I'll even tell my mother and father to go see, and maybe I wouldn't even tell my friends. I'll just do this on the side and have a little money in my pocket. I can pay my rent a few more months, and I didn't expect anything when I actually signed to do the film. I didn't know who Wes Craven was. I didn't know Robert Englund even. I didn't watch V. I wasn't familiar with him as an actor. And I was pretty much fresh, I was just a college student. And once we began filming, it was very clear to me that this movie was going to be really, really good. We had the luxury of going to see the dailies every day. So we'd break for lunch at 11:30, we'd get a sandwich, and we'd go into the room where they showed us everything we shot from the day before. And I would sit next to Wes and the director of photography, Jacques Haitkin, and it would just looked so beautiful. It was seen on a full-size screen too. Nowadays, they go into a video bay and they'll watch it on a video screen, but we were having it projected full-size for us, and Wes would say, okay, we'll take that take, and his supervisor is writing down notes. But Wes was very economical. He didn't do a lot of takes, and so each one that I saw, I'm like, wow, that looked really good, and that was perfect. And then the day that Robert worked for the first time, because we did some scenes without Robert in the beginning, the high school scene where, certain scenes we do that didn't involve Robert. And the scene we did first was the scene where I go down into the basement of the school and I'm looking around and it's the boiler room setting, and then he just comes out of kind of nowhere. And that was so frightening to me. He was so scary. And in the alleyway when he's chasing me, it was dark. I mean, every scene was extremely frightening. and the bathtub scene only added to it. And every day I just watched it unfold, and I knew that I was very proud of my work, but I still knew it was a horror movie. I still thought that maybe nobody would ever see it, and I was kind of, every day my respect for Wes Craven grew a lot. I didn't see the people over there, sorry. And when the movie finally came out, I kind of waited and just waited to see how it did, and it did pretty well, but it really didn't become a phenomenon until maybe 10 years after, when people came together to celebrate it.
Anybody who's ever met Wes Craven will say that he's the most unlikely horror movie director that you'll ever meet.
Yeah.
I mean, he's gone now, bless him, but a very, very quiet, erudite man.
Yeah.
Somebody who would have not been out of place in a university teaching classics. Mm-hmm. He had that about him. It's that deathless question. What was it like to work with him? What was it like on the set when making this film?
He was so serious about his filmmaking, and he wanted it to be so good that I really threw myself into that project with everything I had, and I think he really appreciated it, because sometimes you hire people and they start to work for you, but you never feel like they're giving their all. But Wes would always compliment me that I was trying to do my best, even on days that you're tired and you get in late the night before and you have to drag yourself to the set the next day. I always just felt like I needed to do that for him. He just inspired a lot of respect. And I didn't understand some of those parts of the script, actually. I mean, I didn't really get how Freddy was, going to kill us in our dreams. There's a lot of elements that we're so used to now that when you're reading it for the first time, you're like, okay, tell me that again. He comes into our dreams and he kills us. Is that? And then it's for real? And he was like, yes, this is how. I'm like, I just don't know if I can believe it. He's like, you will believe it, and I'm like, okay. But I was very logical and wanted everything to make sense. But he'd always say, Heather, it's a dream. Just go with it. And so I'm like, okay. And I'd put my pajamas on, and the rest is kind of history.
The film is built on these set-piece moments. I mean, you mentioned the bath scene, which would have freaked me out, certainly.
Yeah.
I suffer from claustrophobia, but also being sucked down in the bath to that huge underwater kind of pool area. I want to talk to you about the geyser and the death of Johnny Depp, but the sequence that always freaks me out is not Freddy. It's the sequence with Nancy and her mum in the basement where she's telling her the story. And I wonder, was there a scary moment for you in the film? It wasn't just a job, clearly. Did you buy into it? And was it a Freddy moment, or was it something else that scared you?
Well, a lot of doing the bathtub scene wasn't scary, but it was very tough because I was in the bathtub all day, and they keep trying to make the water warm and they pour bubbles in, but I was very self-conscious, obviously, and then it was very technical. So the gentleman who's underneath me he's in a tank. If you can imagine a bathtub that's about 10 feet tall, only the top 4 feet we see as the bathtub, but the bathtub goes down.
You built it over a pool.
Yeah, so actually the bathtub was very much like this table, if you can think of it like on the second story, and everything beneath it is a tank. And so the gentleman in a scuba gear got in, and I just was sitting on a very small little 2x4 piece of wood to make it look like I was sitting in the bathtub, but I was really just sitting on a little piece of a crossbar. And then I had a place for my feet. And so underneath me all day long is, Jim. And he was, really had the hardest job of all, because Wes would just, bang on the side of the bathtub whenever he wanted him to stick the hand out, because he couldn't hear anything in that equipment. So it was really technical, and they did it from, if you look at the scene, we did it from about 8 different angles. So each one is a few times again. So by the end of the day, I was exhausted, and, but to see how it turned out, I mean, it's probably one of the most important scenes in horror films now.
What about that sequence that frightened me, the confessional with the mother?
So in the confession scene, it was actually a much longer scene. It had a lot more information. My mother that scene is very scary to me too, because a daughter learns that her mother is truly a criminal, and Wes's message in the film had a lot to do with the evils of vigilante justice. Like, that was one of the messages he really wanted to put across, is that no matter what kind of wrong has been done to you, you know, to just go outside the law and just kill someone because you feel like there's no other way is actually almost just as bad as Freddy Krueger's crime. So that message was much more strong, I think, before they cut it down. Because the mother and the father are never that, implicated in their own crimes. But in that scene, originally, Wes really lays it on thick that they too were kind of beasts, and the way they had gone after Freddy Krueger to kill him because they felt like the justice system had just let them down. And, Wes is a very orderly person, and he thought that that was just as dangerous in many ways. Nowadays, we have vigilante justice. It's almost considered, virtuous. But back then, it wasn't considered that.
And the movies have probably changed that point of view as well, haven't they?
Yeah, probably.
I understand that you weren't, obviously you weren't involved in Johnny Depp's death scene, but that you watched it. Is that true?
Yeah, so we were there on the set that day, and everything that could go wrong did go wrong with that scene. It was a room on a rotating pin, so you can imagine 2 pins and a box, full size, as tall as that, bank of lights, and men pushed it to rotate it, so that same scene with Amanda Wiss's scene. They used the same room twice in the movie so that they could get their money's worth. So for Johnny's scene, they originally were going to have the blood come spurting out of the bed and dripping down the walls. And that was what Wes had planned, and they had all the blood on hand, everything was ready, and all the equipment's in place. And then the men rotated the room the wrong direction. So the blood, instead of going down, dripping down the walls, ended up coming out the open side onto all of us. Everybody, got doused. Like, on the floor was just full of blood, and everyone that was moving the equipment. And I was kind of far away when I heard everybody just kind of pandemonium was breaking out. And then I kind of came in and saw, oh my gosh. And I said, did something go wrong? And then Wes is just shaking his head like, yeah, it's backwards. And they had no budget to clean it up. There was hundreds of gallons of blood, and so that he just said, I'll just see what it looks like the next day. And so the next day we watch it on the film. And it's a colossal mistake. People should have been fired for that mistake. And he looked at it and he just said, I can totally make something out of that. And so what he did is he just put in that beautiful windy sound effect as if all this blood had come into the room and none of it had stayed. And that was just serendipity. He just made that up, like, after he saw it.
How did the rest of the cast buy into it? You said that you were looking for the realism of the story, and you just say, look, it's just a movie.
It's just a movie.
Just get on with it.
Yeah, it's just a dream.
But what about the other cast members? Whether it's Johnny Depp, John Saxon, who had made a lot of low-budget films in his career.
Yeah.
What was their buy-in to the project?
Well, for Ronnie, I felt like it was a part that she really wanted to play. We would do kind of rehearsals before the movie started, going to the mall together and being mother and daughter. We bought a prom dress at the local mall together, and it was a lot of fun, just getting in the mood. She wasn't a mother at that time, so she wanted to kind of feel like what it was like to have a 16-year-old girl, and so we tried to do that, and she was quite invested. The one thing I felt is everybody was very serious. Even today when I'm on the set of a horror movie, so many have been made, and everyone is, trying to carve out their niche in the horror movie industry, but the earnest passion isn't quite at the same level. I just feel like everyone is, they know what to expect, and they know what to do, and they know how to make the special effects makeup, and they know how to get the lighting just right. But back then, everything was really being created for the first time, so everyone, I always keep saying everyone, but you know, the principals like, you know, our DP, Jacques Haitkin, you know, he really was worried about making it stunning to look at. And knowing that it was going to be on a huge movie screen, everything had to be just right.
So they weren't just knocking it off. They were
Not
really
at all.
trying to make it a quality
Yeah,
picture.
and that's something that, you know, I wish I didn't have that many other experiences after that on horror films. So, you know, I do see it on a lot of big budget Hollywood films, that kind of seriousness. But in many of the very, very low budget movies, everyone is a beginner. You know, a lot of people are just making their first or second film, or they are just, you know, raised some money on their own to make a low-budget horror movie. That sense of low-budget horror did not exist, because these were still film. Every take is thousands of dollars. You know, it's low-budget in the way that, you know, Bob Shea, our producer, scraped money together, but still, it wasn't as low-budget as what we would say now.
And what about the sense of Freddy Krueger being a supporting player? You were the lead. It was your story. It was your character's story. And Fred actually, as we call him, not Freddy, but Fred.
Fred Krueger, Mom.
He then comes in later and becomes a franchise about the villain. But really, this first movie was about Nancy, wasn't it?
Well, I always joke with Robert that he's only in 6 minutes of the movie, so he should just step aside. But he just won't do it. I'm trying to think if there was any sense that he was... We both felt like we were really important to the storyline. I mean, we always have that you can't have Nancy without Freddy. That together they were very important. And the movie, you know, of course, started really looking at the Freddy evil part because people loved him so much, even with just such a small amount of really face time in that first movie. And you know, that's, our culture really loves the bad guy. I mean, I wouldn't want to be him, and he wouldn't want to be me, so we're really happy with the roles that we took.
And was there a sense of breaking new ground? If we look back 5 or 6 years prior to Nightmare on Elm Street, there was the Halloween movies coming through, Friday the 13th, right. Around that time, Reanimator in the States. And,
oh yeah, Reanimator.
Hellraiser over here. It was all changing. The horror movie industry was changing. Was there a sense, or did it only come afterwards, that you were breaking new ground?
Well, certainly something was happening in the 70s, late 70s with filmmaking. There were a lot of daring filmmakers, and there was a lot of freedom for people to put out ideas that would have been considered just too disturbing and over the top and violent and sadistic, all those things. And I just feel like something happened where these ideas were ripe for that kind of storytelling. And I can't explain it, but each one of those movies that you mentioned just had a completely different kind of feeling about it too. And you know, some are more, you know, rooted in fantasy, that kind of dark fantasy, and then some are very rooted in American life, which I think Nightmare on Elm Street really wanted to root itself in, like what our society was doing to people and to kids, and how normal people could suffer, you know, how we could suffer in this strange fantasy of our dreams. But at the base of it, it's really pedestrian, really normal, everyday life. And you know, other movies, same with Halloween, same with, you know, they try to be as normal as possible until everything, like all hell breaks loose. And I think in our culture, we were just experiencing that as well. I mean, everything had been quite normal until, say, the Vietnam War or the 60s. And then it just seemed like, in America at least, all hell broke loose. And these directors were very, you know, they were rocked by it, but they also had grown up with it.
Before I open it up to questions, I do want to just talk about Robert for a second. The part was apparently going to be played by a British actor, David Warner, who got stuck on the film, yes. And then they went to Robert, and Robert did it. But Robert has absolutely made the part his own. Yeah. I think the trick in that first film is that while it's a fantasy, and it's very much a fantasy, it has roots in reality, and it is very dark, and it is very grim and very brutal. And I'm sure you've been asked this 1,000 times before, but what do you think that Robert brought to it that allowed him to make the impact that he did? Not just in that one movie, but in all the ones that followed.
Well, he got that the character had to have a lot of physical presence because he didn't have a lot to say. I mean, he did not say much at all in the first movie, so Robert was smart enough to know that every gesture, every single gesture, whether the flicking of the glove or the hat or the way he just like would step out into the alley in that weird posture with one hand like really low and the other shoulder up. He just knew that every single gesture he did was going to be the only thing that lived on screen for Freddie. And so he practiced so much making each like little thing so magnificent and scary, and he taught me so much about, sometimes you think, oh, I don't have much to do in this scene, but you can make it as big or little as you want. And so bringing that to it, Wes just respected him so much to always be bringing even more than Wes had written, because there was not anything on the page, nothing. It was just Freddy Krueger. It was in a hat. Nothing on the page like indicated what Robert did. And I think Wes really lucked out to get Robert.
Thank you for that. Right, we've got about 5 minutes left before we have to go back to signing. So.